All right, on we go. Exercise 122. This is our last official AutoCAD lesson, though technically we're moving more into going back to Illustrator because today is going to be about collaging your AutoCAD drawing that you created last class in Illustrator this class. So we'll spend a lot of time in Illustrator kind of touching it up, making it look good, which is always a nice thing. And I did decide over the weekend that you guys needed a little more time for your assignment 105, so I have decided to extend the due date on that one. It was supposed to be due on Wednesday. It's now going to be due a week from today. It'll be due next Monday instead. So that gives you a little bit of extra time to work on it. In terms of the rest of the semester, we still do have one more assignment, 106, to do. You guys will get that probably next Monday. I'll hand that one out to you. Today, or excuse me, this week on Friday is the last week to withdraw with a W, though I suspect everybody that is actually here right now probably doesn't fall into that category. But I'm going to pass you guys out your current grade sheets so that you can see where you are. If you're feeling a little nervous and you feel like you're not going to get caught up and you don't want to fail, now would be the time to withdraw with no hard feelings. If not, it is what it is, and you take your destiny into your own hands, so to speak. So you guys will get your grade sheets today to pass out. Please pass along to your friends that are not here that they should think about whether they want to stay in the class or not, just so that everybody's kind of on board and aware with that. So we're going to go ahead and start with our exercise 122, which is kind of the post-processing part of our AutoCAD world. And when we're working in AutoCAD, there's kind of two different ways of thinking about AutoCAD. One way is I'm getting my design ideas out and I'm going to create a presentation document, a design review document, something that's going to go up on the wall, something that's going to go in a packet to teach somebody about the design that we're doing, and that's an artistic piece. And so in those cases, in that scenario, doing some post-processing in Illustrator is a good thing. Doing a little bit of tweaking, adding a little bit of text and that sort of thing in Illustrator is great, tweaking the line weights, etc. Now, if we were doing a working drawing set where we had maybe 35 sheets, this is how we're going to build the building, here's all our technical details, would we go in on all 35 of those sheets and do post-processing in Illustrator? Probably not. We'd stick in the world of AutoCAD, we'd do a batch plot, and we'd get our 35 sheets after the fact. So sometimes that's an easier and better strategy for the working drawing world. But in our world, it's almost always design drawings, so doing post-processing in Illustrator is definitely a good thing. So I'm going to start back where we were last class with AutoCAD. I'm going to go through the process of creating the PDF again, and then we'll take that into Illustrator, and I'll start to show you the process through which we're going to make and enhance our drawing. So I already have my drawing complete here. I did add a few extra lines. This line, I think, was on the wrong layer. Yeah, so I'm going to fix that right now before I move forward. There it is. And I added a few extras just because it looked a little bit better. And that was just for visual purposes. I'm going to go ahead and flip over from my model space into my paper space, which we talked a lot about last class. My layout is called 36 by 24. Yours might be called Layout 1 or Layout 2, or you might have renamed it to something. This is essentially the layout that we've created. We have 5 viewports. Everything is oriented correctly. All of the viewports are on non-printing layers so that the boundaries of the viewports don't get printed. They're going to show up just as a drawing. Everything's arranged nicely. I'm happy with it. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and print our file. So I'll go up to the printer icon and create this PDF. Everything's already set. Remember, we set it ahead of time in the page setup. And I'll go ahead and say, OK. I'm going to choose where to put it. In this case, I'm going to put it into today's folder. And we are on 122, right? 122, yep. Let me create a new folder for today. There it is. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. And so that writes the PDF file, which is what we were after. This is what it looks like. It gives us our little preview. There looks like there's some issues with some of my line weights, but if I zoom in here, it's just the way that Acrobat's displaying them. They're actually correct. So that's something to be aware of. They would print correctly. It's just Acrobat being a little finicky about how it's displaying them. I'm going to go ahead and close this drawing because I don't need that in Acrobat. And at this point, I'm going to open up Adobe Illustrator. And this is where we're going to do our post-processing for today. And with Illustrator open, I'll go to the File menu and say Open. And I have to navigate to my folder where I just saved that PDF file. There it is. And the neat thing about a PDF file and Illustrator is that Illustrator can natively open the PDF file and it can natively save to the PDF file. So we're never actually creating an AI, an Adobe Illustrator file. We're just going to keep working on the PDF file itself. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. I'll press Control-0 on the keyboard, and that shows everything on my screen. Now, in my scenario, everything turned out in its correct orientation. For some of you, it might come in portrait instead of in landscape. So I'm going to show those of you that have it come in as portrait how to change this. But bear with me because I have to change it to the wrong way and then change it back to the right way. So hold on for just a second while I make my adjustments here. All right, so some of you, it may have come in this way. And that's OK. There's nothing wrong with it. But when we're working in Illustrator, it's a whole lot easier to see it in its correct orientation. So if yours did come in this orientation and you want to change it, it's a two-part process. In Illustrator, the paper that we work with is called the artboard. That's what they call it. And so in order to adjust that, we need to choose the artboard tool, which kind of looks like, it's almost like a crop tool, but it has a little crosshairs, and then it has a piece of paper attached to it. It's almost all the way to the bottom of your toolbar. We're going to click on that artboard tool, and you'll see when you do that that the paper gets selected, and it says 01-artboard 1. And over here in the properties, we can change the paper to have a landscape or a portrait orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a landscape orientation. You can also change the size of the paper or create yet another new artboard. So you can have multiple artboards on the page. For our purposes, we're just changing the orientation from portrait to landscape. Notice that the paper is independent of the drawing that's on the paper. So I've moved the paper first. When I'm done, I'll click the black arrow. And once I do that, the artboard becomes deselected. The paper stays fixed at that size. It's now time to move all of my drawings. I can press Control-A for all, select all. And then I can use this same black arrow and move to one of the corners. And my cursor will change to a double-sided curving arrow. When I do that, I can rotate all of this at once. As I'm rotating, I'm going to hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, which is going to cause it to jump to 90 degrees, and I can let go. And there it is, all in its horizontal orientation. Now, like I said, this is optional. It just depends on how it came out of AutoCAD. But I like to show you that just in case you get stuck with it in its vertical orientation. So let's take a look at what AutoCAD actually created for us in our layers. So in our layers window, if I expand layer 1, we have 5 separate clip groups. Each of those clip groups represent one of the drawings. So you can see I can turn them all on and turn them all off. The problem with the clipping group is they don't tend to play nice. So we're going to actually get all of those clip groups. We're going to release them before we move forward. So I'm going to take each layer here that says clip group on it, and I'm going to come up to the little flyout menu, the lines that are up here in the top right corner. And when I do that, I can go down to Release Clipping Mask. And that's going to cause this to go from a clipping group to just a regular group. So we're working our way out of that group. Same thing for each layer. So the clip group here, I'm going to click on the flyout menu and say Release Clipping Mask. And I'll do this for each layer. I'll go up to the next one and Release Clipping Mask. Next one here, Release Clipping Mask. Next one here, Release Clipping Mask. I'm going to talk more about clipping masks later on today as we go forward. So don't worry, I'm going to come back to the concept of a clipping mask. But for our purposes right now, we don't need to worry about them being a clip group or a clipping mask because we don't actually need the clipping mask. So now I just have groups that represent each one of my drawings. If I want to go in and change something on a particular drawing, let me zoom in on this floor plan here for a second. There it is. I'm looking at this floor plan. If I want to change something on this drawing, if I just click on it, I select the whole group. If I double click on it, I'll go into what is called group isolation mode, which gets me inside of the group, and I can then work on all of the drawings inside of the group. If I went to try to click on something outside of the group, it's not going to let me click on it because I'm isolating just that particular group. The alternative would be to ungroup the objects altogether, but sometimes it's nice to keep them as grouped objects. So in this scenario, I'm noticing that I have some lines that have either gotten too thin or are starting to disappear, lines like that, or lines like this. I'm going to take a look at what's wrong with those lines. This is my opportunity to make corrections. So let me go ahead and select. I'm going to the Select menu, Same, Stroke Color. OK, so it did select everything. I'll confirm in Properties that the stroke color is black. That's good. Let me go back and select that one line again. Let me go to Select, Same, Stroke Weight this time. So it should select all of the very thin lines. And at that point, I should be able to change the stroke thickness here, maybe to 0.25 points. And let's take a look. All right, that's a little bit better. Now we're seeing all of those lines. So I'm using that Select menu, and I'm using the Select, Same, Stroke Color, and Stroke Weight as a way of helping me select certain groups of objects, rather than going through and saying, OK, well, let me select all the thin lines. Let me hold down Shift and keep selecting. It's too much work. So I'm using that Select menu as a way of kind of jumping forward. Likewise, these little lines in here, let me double click to get inside the group here. This line and this line, they really don't belong. They're not helping anything here. I'm going to go ahead and delete those because I don't really need them. All right, so this starts to look pretty good. Oh, looks like these beds are a little bit too thin. Let me select those beds, and we'll change those to 0.25. Point, like that. So I'm just going through and I'm making some corrections on places where there needs to be corrections. If I felt like a particular line or my walls, for example, weren't thick enough, I could say Select, Same, Stroke Weight. That should select all of my walls. And then I could say, you know what, I want those walls to be a little bit thicker. Let's make them 1.25 points. And now all of those are a little bit thicker. So I can make those adjustments as necessary. If I came over to one of the elevation views, as another example, let me get out of the clipping group or out of the group isolation. I'm going to go back and back there. I'll go over to this side elevation. I'll double click. I'm inside the group now, and I could say I want this ground to be a lot thicker. So let's go up to maybe 3 points. And now that ground is a lot thicker. Same thing, I could come down, double click to get inside this group, take the ground, and we'll go to 3 points. Come down, let me get out of the group. Let me double click to get inside the group. There we go. And I want that ground to be at 3 points. There you go. Looks like I'm having a few issues with my dotted line here. So same thing. I'll select one of them and say Select, Same, Stroke Weight. Should select all of them. And I could say, let's make that a little bit thicker, 0.25. 0.25, there we go, point. And now those are a little bit more visible. Well, for you guys, not so much. But it's just another way of kind of working through the drawings. Okay, so let me press Control 0 to see everything. Oh, I have to make this one thick. So let me go into this view, double click, select the ground, and this one is at 0.3. So of course, I could go back to my AutoCAD file and I could fix them in AutoCAD. That's certainly an option. Or I can fix them here. The point is that I have flexibility, and I want to go through my drawing and make sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to look. So at this point, maybe I want to have certain pieces of the drawing stand out a little bit more. And this is where the collage work starts to get interesting. So let's say, for example, I'm going to concentrate on the plan view for right now. Press Control minus there so I can see the whole plan, right, like that. Let's say that I want to fill in the insides of the walls. Certainly we could have done that with a hatch in AutoCAD. That would be one way of filling it in. But we can also do it inside of Illustrator after the fact. So I'm going to use something called a live paint, which you guys used in your Charlie Harper, to go ahead and fill these in. Before we do a live paint, however, it's always nice to create a duplicate of your lines. Just in case something goes wrong, you can go back to your original lines. So I'm going to close everything down, and I'm going to rename layer 1, and we'll say this is original lines. I'm going to click on the flyout menu and say duplicate original lines layer. And then I will rename this to be maybe working lines. I'm going to take the original lines, I'll turn them off, and I'll also lock them so I don't accidentally do anything. And I'll make sure that that's on top of everything. So the original lines layer is always on top of everything else. Now I have my working lines. This is where I'm going to actually do my work. OK, so to do a live paint, I need to select the whole object. In this case, it's really easy because it's already a group. So I just have to click on one of the objects. I select the whole thing. And I can go to the Live Paint tool, which is hidden underneath the Shape Builder tool. There's the Live Paint bucket. And when I mouse over, it says click to make a live paint group. The alternative to that would be to go up to the Object menu, to go to Live Paint, Make, and that just jumps ahead. It's one way or the other. So in this scenario, I want to fill in all of my walls. Now when I go to fill in the walls, I think the best strategy is to pick some kind of a color. And it doesn't matter what the color is, but this is going to help you identify what you're filling in. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the walls. And I might have to zoom in just a little bit to see it. A little bit more here. And there. All right. So in that case, I've filled in all of the walls. That's good. Sometimes you end up wanting to fill in other parts of the drawing. Maybe I want to fill in the floors, for example. Now I have a choice here. I can fill in all of the floors, or I could fill in the outside and the inside separately. If I wanted to fill in the outside and the inside separately, I have a slight problem because I have nothing dividing where the threshold would be. So in this scenario, I would need to add a little bit of a line. So let me zoom in here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a line. I can do it with the pen tool, or I can do it with the line segment tool. And I just need to go and draw a line across like that. And I also need a line that goes across here, from there to there. So I just added a couple lines. Now, because those are not part of my live paint group anymore, let me select them all. There we go. Oops, sorry, I just want this object. There we go. Those lines aren't part of my live paint group. They're separate objects. I need to go back to the Object menu, Live Paint, and say Merge. That takes those two objects that I just drew and adds them into the live paint group. So now they're in there. And that's going to allow me to go back to my Live Paint tool. And when I fill it in, see how it's separating where those lines are. So let's fill in the outside and the inside separately. I'm going to pick different colors. And this is the kind of thing where you might decide after the fact that, you know what, I really do want them all to be the same. But it gives you flexibility at this point. So I pick another color, and I'm going to fill in the outsides. There's the outside filled. I'm going to pick a different color yet again. That's too ugly of a color. And we'll fill in the inside. So there's the floor on the inside. This is a good option if you had trouble with your hatching in AutoCAD not working around your various blocks. Sometimes this is a good way of filling it in. So I've gone ahead and I've filled in the interior floor, I have the exterior floor filled in, and I have the walls filled in. When all of that's done, I need to expand the live paint group so that I can actually work with the live paint group a little bit more. I'm going to go up to the Object menu. I'm going to go to Live Paint, and I'm going to choose Expand. And when I click on Expand, it's going to break this apart into its individual little segments here. That's going to allow me to use the Direct Selection tool, the white arrow, to select the individual pieces. So let's start with the walls. I'll click on one of the walls. There it is, selected. I will go up to the Select menu and say Select Same Fill Color. And that's going to select all of the walls. And I'd like them to be on their own layer. So I'll go ahead and create a new layer. There it is. I'm going to rename layer 3 here to be Walls, or Wall, how about Wall Fill? And I'm going to move those objects, which are currently selected, onto the Wall Fill layer. They're represented by this square on the Working Lines layer. I'm going to drag that up onto the Wall Fill layer, and now all of the walls are on the Wall Fill layer. I'm going to go ahead and select the exterior surfaces. I'll go to the Select menu and say Select Same Fill Color. There we go. Those are all selected. Again, I will create a new layer. We'll rename this layer. This is Exterior Patio. I will right-click, or excuse me, I will drag this little box up onto the Exterior Patio layer, and now that's on its own layer as well. I can come back to the yellow that is the floor, and we will go to Select Same Fill Color. And one more new layer, and this will be, let's call this Interior Floor. All right, so I now have the interior floor layer, and we're going to move these onto the interior floor layer. I'm going to click and drag so that they go onto the interior floor layer. At this point, I can turn off the Working Lines layer. I'm not worried about those anymore. I have my interior floor, I have my exterior patio, and I have my wall fill. Let's look at the wall fill first. So there's my wall fill. I can turn on my original lines layer just so we can see what the lines look like. That always helps you kind of visualize it. And now maybe I want to change that wall fill color. At this point, all I have to do is select the wall fill. There it is. I press Control A on the keyboard to select it. Actually, let me go to the black arrow here. And I can do that by pressing Control A, or I could select all of the objects that are on the wall fill layer by clicking where the box would be, and that selects all of them. Either way. So I have those selected, and now maybe I want to change what color those are. So let's pick a gray. I'll do a 0, 0, 0, and maybe 30% gray. And we can see that where the, well, you guys can't see that. I can see it really nicely. Let's try that again. I'll do it as a darker gray here. You guys still can't see that. Wow, the projector's awful right now. Let's do 80. There, now you guys can see it, where I filled in all of those walls. And what we want to kind of look at when we do this sort of thing is when I press Control 0 and I'm seeing the whole drawing, does the floor plan kind of read a little bit better? And one of the great things about setting this up in Illustrator is you can turn on and turn off. You could say, okay, well, there's the floor plan without the fill. There's the floor plan with the fill. Does it help identify what are the walls? From how far away am I going to read this? You'll see that the smaller the plans get, the more likely it is the walls get filled in some kind of a dark shade. So you have to think about the scale that it's going to print, what it's going to look like on the wall, and how easy you want it to be readable. We could take it all the way to making those walls black. I could double click and I could say, you know what, I really want these to be 100% black. And now they'll read as solid masses instead. The advantage here is I have the flexibility to change that. On my screen, interestingly enough, like a 30 or a 40% gray looks great. So let's go to 40. Oops, sorry. 40. Yeah, that looks good. For you guys, you can't really see that it is up there. So I'll go ahead and make that a little bit darker for the purposes of the projector, though in all reality, I think it's better off at a 30 or a 40% gray. You go ahead and go 0, 0, 0, and then I'll go to 80, because at least then you guys can see it on the projector. Okay, so now what about if I want to fill in the ground of the floor plan a little bit, to have that show up a little bit better? Well, I can go to the, let's do the interior floor first. I'll select that. Oh, wait, I have to turn it on first. There we go. I can select it. That's selected. And I'm going to lock the wall fill for right now so that I don't accidentally select it. I have the floor fill, and I could, again, fill it with a simple color. So I could say 0, 0, 0, and I'm going to go, let's try 70. Yeah, there you go. You guys can see it. Let me try 60, see if that's a little bit better. Yeah, and you guys can still see it on the projector. So you see I'm using that to kind of identify what's happening in that particular building. Now, this is a pure straight color. There's no texture to it. There's no, it's a very stark computer graphic color. Sometimes we want a little bit more modeling to go in. Or we want to have a little bit of a grunge texture to it. You can apply a grunge texture directly to this if you wanted to, but sometimes you want to make it look like something particular. I have available for you guys on the course website in the resources section, if you go to swatches, I have a bunch of Prismacolor marker sets, which are designed to mimic if you actually colored it in with markers. When I was in architectural school, it was a big kind of trendy thing, for lack of a better term, to use Prismacolor markers, physical markers, and actually draw with markers. I know it's shocking. But I got really into the Prismacolor markers and liked them. This is my attempt to recreate those same markers in kind of a digital format. And it tends to work pretty well. It's not quite as stark as just a plain color. And so anyway, I have a bunch of different sets that are available for you. I have them already downloaded on my flash drive. You guys can choose to download them if you want. These sets are designed to mimic sets of Prismacolor markers that you can buy. There's an architectural set that you can buy. There's a landscape set that you used to be able to buy that they discontinued, but this mimics that set. There's a warm gray, a French gray, a cool gray, a portrait set, and then I put them all together so you can download them all. Anyway, these download and can be opened in Illustrator. If I want to open up swatches, I'm going to go to the Window menu and choose Swatches. There they are. And with swatches open here, I'll click on the flyout menu. I'll say Open Swatch Library, Other Library. And this is where you go browse and find those particular swatches. So I have them on my flash drive in my Resources folder in the, they're probably in Illustrator. Swatches, there we go. And let me go ahead, and I'm going to load in the warm gray. There we go. So these are available. The ones with the texture on them are going to be the ones that are the AI file that you're loading. The Adobe Swatch Exchange file are just the colors. We can't get the textures to come in. So I want the Adobe Illustrator file. There it is. I'll go ahead and open it, and we'll load up there. Doesn't look too fancy, but all of these do have those textures in them. The advantage here is that I could take the whole floor, and I could apply any one of these textures that have a little bit of a marker pattern. I don't know that you guys will be able to see it on the projector. See if I can zoom in a little bit. There are some streaks in it. Yeah, you guys can see it a little bit on the projector where there's the streaks. So it's just a way of making the fills a little bit more casual. To me, that's significantly too dark. I'd be picking something much lighter, though you guys aren't going to be able to see it on the screen, which is unfortunate. So I think I would fill it in, maybe the interior at about a 50%, and then I would take the exterior. Let me go ahead and select the exterior. I'll turn it on and select it, and maybe the exterior one shade lighter. So if I did the interior at 50, I might do the exterior at 40. And now if I zoom out a little bit, press Control-0, you should be able to start, well, you guys can't see it. This projector is killing me today. You should be able to see a little bit of contrast between what is happening inside and what is happening outside. You guys can't see a thing. I apologize for that. It looks a lot better on my screen than it does on the projector. Anyway, so those are available to you. There are other colors. You would load them the same way. I'll click on the little flyout menu. I'll say Open Swatch Library, Other Library, and I'll go into my flash drive. And so, for example, I could open up the architectural set. And you can see that the architectural set has a bunch of other colors available in it, including like a blue and whatever. So anyway, you can play around with those. They tend to be a little bit more on the tan side of the colors. For whatever reason, I've always really liked the warm grays. They tend to print nice, and they're not quite as stark as the cool grays. Anyway, so you go ahead and you can collage that in. The idea here is subtlety, but that when you print the drawing, it reads a little bit better. And that's really what we're after, not overpowering. Could we texture in like, carpet or something? Sure, we could, but it tends to overshadow the drawing. It becomes too strong. And that's something that's really important that you need to learn, is how much is too much. Subtle toning is great. Too heavy toning can overpower your drawing and you lose what's happening in the particular drawing. So what about when we have something like an elevation view? How do we collage in here? So I'm going to move on from the plan view for a second. Let me nest these two swatches together. And I'll go ahead and I can close this one. I'll leave these down at the bottom for later. And I can do the same thing on one of these side elevation views. So let me go ahead and go back to, I'm going to turn off my original lines. I'm going to turn off all of my fills here, and I'm going to turn back on my working lines. And I'm going to work with this elevation view. So I'm going to do the same thing with Live Paint, where I select my object here. I'm going to go up to Object, Live Paint, Make. That makes my Live Paint object, and will let me go ahead and start filling it in. I'll use the Live Paint Bucket tool, which is available by pressing K, or you can click on the Live Paint Bucket tool here. And I'm going to give myself a fill color of kind of a blue. And I'm going to fill in all of the individual windows. So anywhere there's glass is what I'm going to fill in. And the good news is it goes pretty fast. There we go. I've filled in all of those windows. I could fill in for the siding and collage everything, or maybe I just want to show just a little bit of texture for the windows. Again, this is a matter of you deciding what's appropriate. How much is too much? How much is too little? It's a visual decision. So I've gone ahead and I've selected that. Now that I've selected this, I'm going to go up to my object, or I've painted this, sorry. I'm going to go up to Object. I'm going to go back to my Live Paint, and I'm going to go to Expand. So same thing I did last time. Object, Live Paint, Expand. I'll choose my Direct Select tool, the white arrow. I'll select on one of the windows here. I'll go up to my Select menu and choose Same Fill Color. Now all of those are selected. I will make a new layer for these. You see there's a lot of repetition here. We'll call this, what elevation is this? This is the north elevation. So I'll say N windows for north windows. I'll move all of those objects onto the north windows layer. Click and drag that up. And now they're all on the north windows layer. I can turn off my working lines. I can turn back on my original lines. And I could adjust the color here to be a lighter blue. And maybe that by itself looks OK. Again, projector doing an awful job of repeating things here. Let me try that one more time. And again, for your purposes, I'll make it a little bit darker. There you go. So we're seeing, OK, well, that's glass. It looks a little bit like a SketchUp version of glass. So what if, instead of doing that, what if I wanted to have a reflection of some clouds or something in there instead? That's something that I absolutely can do in Illustrator. I need two things to do that. One, I need a picture of some clouds. And I need to create a special layer that's going to make what's called a clipping mask using these objects. This is all written out, and there's tutorials that will help you through this. If you go into Tutorials and Illustrator, and you choose the, let's see here, clipping mask from Live Paint. Right there. This will walk you through the whole thing. So this is actually one of the very first tutorials I ever wrote. This will walk you through how to do that. So it's there. You guys can look at that. But I'm going to go through it and do it for you as well. I need to find a picture of clouds. This is a great opportunity to use the Creative Commons search. So I'll type search.creativecommons.org. Let's use Flickr, and we'll say cloudy sky. And that did not search where I wanted it to. There we go. And so I'm going to pick something with some clouds that look the way I want it to. Remember, if you're using Google Image Search, you can go to size larger than. You probably want at least 2 megapixel in size, maybe more, depending on the resolution and how big your image is going to end up being. And once you've done that, you want to pick an image of clouds that looks interesting to you. I have a bunch that I already have on my flash drive, but let's just go with, say, this one. So there's that one. I'm going to go ahead and download this file. Let me go ahead and visit it. There it is. I'm going to right-click and say Save Image As. And I'll put it on my flash drive. Now, under the Resources folder, I have a bunch of skies that I've done before. I think they're under Collage. There's skies. So I would put it in here and click Save. And then I'll come back into my Illustrator file. Now, on the North Windows layer, I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Place to bring in that file. Let me go to my flash drive, Resources, Collage, Sky. There it is. And we'll place it. Now, when I click to place it, it's going to be gigantic. Well, actually, it's not too bad. So that's good. Now I can just adjust the size so that it fits and covers up all of my windows. Obviously, I don't want the ground to show up. I just want the clouds to show up. I need to make sure that it completely covers my windows. There we go. And I'm going to move this a little bit higher. Yeah, so it's about like that. Now I want all of these. I'm going to turn off the lines for a second. And I'm going to look at my layer. I have a linked file and I have a group that represents all of those windows. Let me put the linked file below the group here for a second. There we go. So now we can see all the individual little shapes, and we can see the photo here. Now if I went from here and jumped into creating a clipping mask, it would use one of the shapes but not all of the shapes. In order to use all of the shapes, I actually need to take these and make the group, so all of those objects, I need to make them into one object. And I'll do that by going up to the Object menu, and I'll go to my Compound Path and then Make, right there. And it's going to take this group of all those individual pieces, Object, Compound Path, Make, and make them into one compound path. So you see all those individual objects become one object. So it's different than grouping. In order for this whole thing to work, we have to be very specific. So I need the compound path. It needs to be on top of the linked file. And once that's happened, I'll click on the windows themselves, the main layer, go up to the flyout menu and say Make Clipping Mask. And when that happens, it's going to cut out the photo with just all of those individual little windows. At that point, I could turn back on my original lines, and you can see the clouds where the windows would be. Well, theoretically, you would be able to see the clouds where the windows would be. You could see a little bit of them. For me, actually, these look a little bit too dark, so I would probably lighten them up by selecting the image itself, going to Properties, and changing the opacity down a bit. You guys would never see it if I adjusted it on the projector. So let me go ahead and do that whole process again on the windows on this view, for example. So I'll come back. I'll select this. Sorry. Let me turn off my original lines. Let me turn back on my working lines. I'll select the south elevation. I'll go to Object, Live Paint, Make. And then I'll go ahead and fill with kind of a blue color. Oops, was not what I wanted. Sorry, I have to pick the live paint tool first. There we go. Now I can fill with a blue color where all of the windows are. There we go. So I filled all of those in. With all of those filled in, I will go up to the Object, Live Paint, Expand, breaks it apart, and it will let me select one of these blue objects. And then I can go to Select menu, select Same, Fill Color. Now all the windows are selected. I'll create a new layer. That new layer will be called S Windows because this is the south elevation. There it is. And I will move all of these objects onto the South Windows layer. Click and drag the box up onto the South Windows. We'll turn off the working lines, and we'll have a look. Looks like I messed up and I added one extra fill around the outside. That fill, that one right there. No, let's see here. There we go. Let me press Control minus to zoom out, and there are all of those objects. If we look at the layer, they're inside of a group. There they all are. Remember, I need to make them one compound path. So select them all. There they are. I'll go to Object, Compound Path, Make. Makes them into one object. Let me fill them in again just so you can see them. There they all are. Why are these still having issues? Not sure. Try it one more time. Object, Compound Path, Make. And they still don't like me. All right, well, I'll come back and sort that one out, but I want to keep moving forward so you guys can see the collage here. OK, so I need to bring in my sky background. I'll go to File and then Place. And we'll drop this file in again. You don't have to use the same file. You could use a different file. Make sure that that's big enough. There it is. I have to make sure that my compound path is on top of the linked file. There it is. Once that's the case, I can go ahead and create my clipping mask. I'm going to go selecting the main layer here, Flyout menu, Make Clipping Mask, and it's going to clip those out. And I can then turn back on my original lines. Something went wrong over here when I did the live paint. And so I'll have to go back and fix that a little bit later on. But you guys don't need to watch me do that. So let me press Control-0. I can zoom out. And now I'm seeing sky where my windows would be, which is a good way of kind of identifying what are windows. Now I could go as far as collaging in textures on all the buildings. I have an example where I did that from a while back. Let me see here. I think it might be this one. Yeah, there you go. In this scenario, boy, the projector is just so awful today. Wonder what happened. I'll have to check the brightness on it or something. Anyway, in this scenario, yeah, you can't see a thing. All of these have collaged in both the windows and the kind of where the concrete would be. It might be a little bit much, and when you go to print it, you might end up getting too muddy. And so you have to be aware of that. They may need to be really light textures, etc. So once I've gotten to the point where I have the drawing set up and I have the collaging the way I want it, it's time to add in text. And we can add in the text manually by just clicking on the text tool and then starting to draw. Now I would recommend creating a new layer at the very top of everything for text. I'll call it text. I'll make sure it's highlighted in blue, and then I can go ahead and start typing. So this particular elevation was my north elevation. So I could write in, I'm going to do all caps, north elevation. And one of the things that I've found that students like to do is they say, oh man, I'm looking at this right now, and this font is nowhere near big enough. So let me select it, and let me go to Properties, and let's make it so that I can actually read it, because that's going to be way too small. Ah, that looks great. And they put this nice text in there. OK, that's wonderful. Good. OK, so when I go to print this, and it's 24 by 36, and it's on the wall, and I look at this elevation, what am I going to see? I'm going to see the big, bold text. I'm not going to see the drawing. I'm going to focus on that big, black text. Fonts and text, when they go on an architectural drawing, need to be small. They're not the most important thing. The drawing's the most important thing. So in this scenario, this north elevation, if I had it that big, let me go back to my layers and turn on these others for my plan, that N is almost the same thickness as a wall. There's no way that this north elevation label is as important as my floor plan itself. So text always needs to be small. I would say, rule of thumb, no larger than 18 point. You can get away with like 14, and that's probably fine. So I'd go back to my properties, and I'd say, OK, you know what? I don't want it that big. We'll make it 18 point. Now if you look and you kind of squint at it, OK, that doesn't seem so unreasonable. It's not nearly as thick. So we need to orient it. We need to put our north elevation text. Maybe it goes right about there. And maybe I need to copy it. We'll paste it. I'll come up here. Maybe I'll start on this one. This would be the south elevation. We'll paste it again. And this time, what is this? This is the east elevation. And this one at the bottom would be the west elevation. All right, so I've tastefully added the text. I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of those pieces. I'll pick one of these as the key text. There it is. And then I'll use the Align tools. I'll go to Window and then Align to make sure that all of those are lined up with each other. That helps. This one doesn't matter so much. This is also, you know, up here I could put in text for floor plan. How about floor plan, for example? Now all of these drawings are to scale. So sometimes you want to add in a little bit of text for the scale. So let me zoom in here a little bit. And I'm going to work to create a hierarchy of my text. So I'll create another little text box here. But this won't be the same size. I'll drop it down to maybe 12 point. And I'll say 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. And I might put it underneath the north elevation. That still seems a little bit large to me. So let's drop it down even further. Let's go to maybe 8 point. And I'll orient it like that, for example. So this is reading rather nicely. Sometimes, however, you want a little bit more of, say, a graphic bar scale or something to go into this. I have a series of examples of these that you can download and you can use kind of like blocks. They're available either through today's downloads. There is right here. There's a zip file of title blocks, graphic bars, etc. They're also available under the resources folder under the downloadable resource packages section. And here's the zip file of title blocks, graphic bar scales, etc. You'll right-click on it and you'll say Save Link As. This will download it into your flash drive. You will then need to extract that file. But inside of that file are a bunch of things that I created that might help you in these kinds of scenarios. So if you wanted to bring one in, you go to File and then Place. Now when you're using these, I suggest unchecking Link, making sure that one's unchecked. But let me go into my flash drive. I have them in my resources folder in Illustrator. Here they are under title blocks. And there's a variety of these. I'll get to the title blocks in just a second. But here's the drawing scale. I'll use the casual quarter scale. I'm going to uncheck Link, which is going to allow me to edit it. And I'll go ahead and place it. It's looking for a particular font. This font is one that I use frequently on my own drawings. It's called Frank the Architect. You can get a free version available online that you can use. You can also get the paid version that includes the bold and a couple alternates and whatever. The free version is great. Obviously, it's not installed on these computers, so it's going to substitute a font for me, which is fine. And now I can drop this in. We'll go ahead and close that. And if I zoom in on this, you can see that this is set up as a graphic bar scale. It's a little bit casual in its setup, so it looks like it's drawn by hand. And we have the scale set up so that there's 1 foot, there's 2 feet, and there's 4 feet. It has what the scale would be. So this might be something that instead of writing here, 1/4 inch equals a foot, you might just put the graphic bar scale here. Or maybe the graphic bar scale would go on this side. Drop this back. And this east elevation would go on the other side. So we'd have the graphic bar scale here. And we'd have the text that says east elevation over there, for example. So we're trying to kind of set that stuff up. I have some other options. If you don't like that one, you can go to File and then Place. And I have the clean 1/4 inch equals a foot. Go ahead and place that one in. And if we zoom in, same thing, but it's done with just a simple line instead of the kind of casual style. It's just a different way of looking at it. If I go to File and then Place, let's see what else I have. I have drawing style, drawing title. Let's use the clean one here. This one just has a graphic bar at the end and the ability to put your title in. So in this scenario, I would double click to get in here, and I could say this is the east elevation. And it melds all of these things together, and I would just use the, oops, sorry. I could just use this as the whole drawing label. Probably goes on this side based on the way the drawing looks. And I could get rid of the east elevation text. Well, I'll tell you what, let me put this down here, and we'll do it for the west elevation instead, since I have so much other stuff up there. Come down here, and we'll say this is, come on, let me in. West elevation. All right, and now that's set up. And I can use that as a graphic bar scale / title block. So there's just options. If I want a title block to go around the entire page, I also have some options for you there. If you go to File and then Place, same thing. We have title blocks. These are all casual style. So in this scenario, I'm using the 24 by 36. And I go ahead and place that. And I would drop it in this upper corner, and it would go there. Now notice it blocked out everything. That's because it has an image behind it that is representing the title block. If I want that to change, I can change the blending mode of this particular image. So let me double click to get inside. Actually, I don't think I have to. Let me go. There we go. If I click on this text for opacity, right here, it's normal, and I can just change to multiply. Same thing in Photoshop. We work through that. And then I can go through and edit the drawing title and that sort of thing. Typically, on a presentation drawing, you don't have a title block, but on something that's printed and given to somebody, you do have a title block. So it's just a matter of preference, and I want you guys to be aware that that exists. So stay away from the giant text. There are rare circumstances where the giant text can work. That would work if you had a big block of color down at the bottom and the text became part of that big block of ground. I'll show you one quick example just so that you can see it. Let me go ahead and this is the title block here is getting in my way. There we go. Let me get rid of the south elevation text. And so in this scenario, I would fill in the ground here. Oh, wait, I have to be on this layer. No, I don't. Let me go ahead and have to make an adjustment for the how level it is at the bottom. Yeah, it's off just a bit. Pull this down so it's a little bit more flat. I can use a guide later on. But the point is I have that big black area. The black is probably a little bit intense, so I might go into a kind of a darkish gray instead, something like that. Now, on this, I could then use some large text. I'll say this was my south elevation. And I could take that text and might even be a little bit bigger. We'll turn this text white. And we'll arrange it. The point here is that the text becomes part of the graphic elements of that block. Does that make sense? So it's no longer that big black line that I'm seeing. It's kind of just a subtle thing that's in the background. This I had to make much darker than I would in practice. In practice, this should be much lighter so that it's really not drawing much attention to it. So you guys could just barely see it there. I could see it a little bit better. The point is that it's not dominating the composition. The text isn't too bold. The drawing is living independently. So it's another strategy that you can get away with the big text. Some people like to do it graphically. The key is making sure that that gray is nice and light, so it's a very subtle label versus something that's really bold, which is not what we want. So I threw a lot of different things at you. I think one of the important parts about this collage work is learning graphically what feels right. What's too much? What's too little? How do you make it look good? How do you make it not look bad? Those kinds of questions. So just because I did it doesn't mean you have to do it on your assignment. Does that make sense? So you pick what looks good. If you think filling in the walls look good, fill in the walls. If you don't think the floors look good filled in, don't fill in the floors. You're not going to be graded down because of that. This is just how do you take your drawing that was an AutoCAD drawing and kind of enhance it to look good. So when I'm all done with this file, I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Save. It's going to save it as a PDF file. So Illustrator is saving the PDF file, which means you can open it in Acrobat. So let it finish its save. There we go. I'm going to close Illustrator. We can go ahead and clear that clipboard. That's fine. And I'm going to open that file. There it is. I'll open it. Here it is in Acrobat. And now it's time to print it. You guys are all responsible for printing it. It's part of your grade. I'm not grading the printed version, but I'm checking off that you were able to print it, which is part of your grade. Does that make sense? So I'm going to grade the one that's online because I can see it a lot better than what happens on the printer. But it's a requirement in this class. It's actually one of the student learning outcomes that you know how to plot when it comes out. So I have to make sure that this is a graded component of the class. So when it comes to printing at school, plotters are notoriously difficult. They just are. So if you come in on Monday morning, a week from today, and you go, by the way, for those of you that trickled in late, I extended the deadline on this, so it's due on Monday instead of on Wednesday, so you have a little more time. If you come in on Monday morning and you try to print, something's going to go wrong and you're not going to get it printed. So give yourself enough time to actually print it. So try to print towards the end of this week, maybe Thursday or Friday. Make sure it prints out nicely. Remember, I'm grading the online version, not the print, but make sure you're able to create a print. Okay? So here's the deal with the plotter. You technically can, from any one of these printers, send it to one of the plotters via the whole GoPrint server thing. It rarely works nicely. I'm just being honest. So what I would do is I would sit down at one of the two computers at the end down there, or one of the computers in the lab that's closest to the plotter, and I would find the USB cord that's somewhere behind the printer and plug it directly into your computer. That's the best scenario. Furthermore, if you have a laptop and you want to plug it straight into your laptop, I didn't tell you to do it, but do it, because that's a really good way of just installing it yourself. Okay? So just be aware that direct connection between plotter and computer means plotting tends to go better. Okay? So, when you go to print, you're going to open up Acrobat, you're going to go to File and then Print, and you're going to find the plotter, which is probably named something like a T520C or something along those lines. If you're installing it, if you plug it in directly, it will appear and it will be kind of obvious. It shouldn't say Go Print ahead of it because you're plugging directly into, it should just be listed as the 520C or something along those lines. It could say Design Jet. That's another thing that it might say. Again, on my computer here, obviously I'm too far away from the plotter, so it's not connected to it. But I can pick the 520C, which is what it is. Once I have that picked, I need to go through and make some adjustments because it's currently trying to print on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is not correct. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to change the size of the paper. I'm going to click on the Properties. And with the Properties selected here, I'm going to change my paper document size. So I'm going to choose ArcD, which isn't listed. Let's click on More, and we'll find an ArcD. There it is. Once I've chosen ArcD, I'll say OK, and that should change my size to be 24 by 36. That's good. Now, if we look over here at the roll, it's printing in the wrong direction on the roll. So let me go back and see if I have, under More, if I have a different ArcD. No, I'm just going to have to find where I changed the orientation. So let me go to Layout and Output. And there it is. I want it to be in landscape. And you can see on this little roll of paper that that's an efficient use of the paper. Doing it this way is not an efficient use of the paper. So we're going to make sure it switches over to landscape. And there it is. I'm going to go back to paper and quality here so I can finish this up. Print quality, for our purposes, you can use speed setting. I don't need it to turn out perfect. I just need you to have a print come out. Furthermore, if you wanted to change it and do it in black and white, that would also be okay too. Like I said, I just need the documentation that you were able to do the print in the first place. So that's set up there. That's good. Let me go to Layout and Output tab. I always go through all the tabs just to double check things. In this size, we want to make sure that our resizing options are set to actual size. So the last thing you want to do is choose the Fit To because it's going to shrink everything down. Your scales are going to be off. We were so careful to establish a 1/4 inch equals a foot. We don't want to screw it up in the final print. So make sure that it is actual size, or you could say 100%. That would get you the same thing. So it's set as actual size. We'll go in here in color. I'm suggesting that you print in color, especially if yours has any color on it. It's not going to cost you any more to do it, but be aware that you could obviously print black and white if you wanted to. Surfaces don't matter. Advanced really doesn't matter. So we've gone through our options. Everything seems OK. I'll say OK down here, and we should see this change to 36 by 24 like that. If it doesn't, go back to Properties and do it again. So all of that set up. Here's another opportunity, though, for the scale to get messed up. So it's set by default as a PDF to shrink oversized pages. We're going to print actual size instead. So we're going to make sure that that's set. Orientation auto, all of that sounds pretty good. The rest of this is fine. At this point, we'll go ahead and click on Print, and this will send the print job. I'm not going to do it because it's not going to, I don't need to print it right now, but that will go ahead and send the print job to the printer, which takes a little bit of time. As far as I know, both this plotter and the other one are working. Sometimes they're not both working, but as far as I know, they're both working, so you should be able to print to either one. There should be enough paper and there should be enough ink for all of you to plot as well. If I'm not here and you're trying to print, try to find David Rivas, whose office is right next to mine, and see if he can get you the ink that you need if it runs out, or the paper that you need if it runs out. If he's not here, find Daniel, find Chi. One of them should be able to get the paper for you. Okay? Or I guess Jeffrey, too. Make sense? So that's the whole printing process. If you have trouble printing, let's talk on Wednesday. Or if you want to practice your printing on Wednesday, that's a good day to try to do it because I'm here. All right? So I'll let you guys start your work. You have the rest of the day to work. You can still make modifications to your drawings, etc., but today's about collage and kind of getting the final output set up for you.